One, do you have any idea what has been plaguing students for a few decades now? Depression. So let's talk about it. Now then, there seems to be a lot of information in regards to depression, but many people tend to confuse it with anxiousness and a nervousness to interact with those around you. But in reality, it is much more than that. In fact, depression is often not instantaneous and is built up over time due to the pressures put on students as well as not being able to cope with the situation. And as a whole, it has been at an all-time high. It has even increased by an astounding 8% at the end of 2020, so it has to be addressed. As a way to go over this topic, I'm just going to be talking about how it impacts students, the signs of it, as well as finding ways to help those that want or need help. Starting off, how does it actually impact students on a larger scale? Well, as a whole, it creates a situation in which students have a lack of attendance and attention in their classes, which may lead to worse grades and improper treatment, which leads to depression. According to the Aspire program created by El Camino Health, the transition from adolescence into the teenage years tend to not have a lot of support by parents when they're growing up during middle and high school, which creates an improper environment to cope with their feelings, emotions, and personal interactions. For instance, teenagers that are growing up often act differently in the beginning stages of puberty, and how the parents deal with it can have a positive or negative impact on them. Secondly, there are some cases that make it harder for students to feel safe at school, so being treated nicely by instructors and teachers is also very important. Secondly, assuming students are not exactly happy, there are many problems that are created with school when it comes to bad teachers. This is often in the form of them being harsh on the students and creating an environment that makes learning harder as a whole when they are making a mistake. This makes learning more difficult and puts pressure on students that are failing or even passing the classes because they're putting a lot of focus on the classes themselves due to the poor teachers. This leads to worse grades and a focus on specific classes instead of all of their classes as a whole, because they are not able to cope with the expectations given to them by the teachers. This causes students to feel defined by a simple grade too, as they are growing up, which leads to a greater problem when they do not meet their personal goals, especially when good grades are expected by some teachers. Failing in a class often causes them to focus on school more than their own health too, such as not having proper nutrition and having a lack of sleep. This causes some parents to lash out as well to their kids, which leads to more pressure and depression when they feel like they are treated poorly by those around them in school and in the home they grew up in. Lastly, once students start to give up on trying to do good in their classes because of the environment they are in, they may start to unattend school, which leads to isolation and loneliness. Isolation then causes them to not interact with friends and family and increases depression that individuals have. Secondly, it also leads to feeling misunderstood when left alone and not attending school, which creates a downward spiral that is hard to come out of. Now then, what are the early symptoms of depression and how can you help? How can you tell that they are increasing? An important symptom of depression is the lack of energy and motivation. A lack of energy and motivation is somewhat broad, but an easier way to understand it is if someone that used to be active and have a reasonable goal for themselves and then lose that, it is often seen as a lack of energy. There is also an extent to a lack of motivation, as losing it towards a specific goal is a common symptom for those that have depression. The lack of motivation is often subtle, but increases over time and causes people with depression to stop trying to do anything at all, such as going outside or even eating. Another symptom of depression is a change in emotion and common behaviors that used to be present or they even develop. According to an article written by the Doctors of Mayo Clinic, many students that have depression have a feeling of emptiness, sadness, irritability, worthlessness, and even guilt in the later stages of depression. Most of these symptoms lead to students having arguments with those around them and are misunderstood due to how many emotions are going through their heads. Some behaviors such as sleeping and slower thinking are also common, and those that have depression often have insomnia. This ties in with slower thinking as their minds are not able to rest, which leads to irritability and a lack of focus. Now then, how do we actually help students that want help or even need it? A common solution is to hire a therapist. This creates a proper environment for them to talk about their emotions as well as talk about the problems in their lives that they are not comfortable bringing up to their parents and friends. Secondly, some therapists are actually very helpful when it comes to talking about the emotional state of oneself as well as giving proper feedback to them when they are confused about it. There is also the help from family and friends that is quite simple, such as being a parent to those that have depression. You should just be by their side no matter the circumstance, whether they're doing very good or very bad in school or acting up or anything like that while they're growing up. This can be a slow process for kids as well as teachers, but it helps in the long term. Secondly, there is also help from friends, such as being there for them by their side no matter the circumstances. Now then, so all in all, depression will always be a sensitive topic, and it comes down to the person and what you could do to help them. The causes, symptoms, and even treatments are varied, so it is hard to help those that have depression. So slowly helping and understanding the person is important in regards to their performance in school and at home. And all in all, depression is different for everyone, and it may take years or never dissipate. So all we can do is to help them slowly and properly.